Hi there, I'm Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking. In this episode, we will be discussing the 1992 movie The Lawnmower Man, a movie which is named after a Stephen King story from the Night Shift collection, and aside from the name, has literally nothing else in common with the short story. History and background. The Lawnmower Man was directed by Brett Leonard, who also directed 1995's Virtuosity. Leonard also co-wrote the screenplay with someone else whose name is of no importance. This film was adapted from an original screenplay entitled Cyber God, which isn't the short story by Stephen King. Apparently, both stories involved a gardener who operates a lawnmower, and that was somehow good enough for Leonard, who was more interested in riding King's coattails than making a fucking decent movie. The movie was originally to be promoted as Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man. However, the movie differed so much from the source material that King successfully sued to have his name removed from the credits. King stated in court documents that the film, quote, bore no meaningful resemblance to his story, unquote. On appeal, it was ruled in October 1992 that the on-screen credit could remain, but that King's name should be removed from all advertising. King received $2.5 million in this settlement. King sued again when his name was included in the title of the home video release, which initially was released saying, Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man. As a result, New Line was held in contempt of court in 1994. The hijinks from the studio didn't stop there, though. Alongside the 108-minute theatrical version, New Line Home Video also released an unrated director's cut. The success of the unrated version alerted King to New Line's continued defiance of the order that his name be stricken from the film's credits and all marketing, as the back cover stated, based on a story by Stephen King. A third court order was needed to force the studio's compliance. As before, the court upheld the two prior judgments, but it took the extra step of imposing a penalty of $10,000 directly payable to King for every day New Line remained in contempt by defying the order. Additionally, the studio would have to forfeit all profits they made during that time period. Wow, what the hell is wrong with these guys? I mean, it worked out well for King as he made millions off of New Line's terrible movie, which somehow made over $30 million at the box office alone. Presumably, that is because they lied to the audience about their movie being based on a King novel. Talk about false advertising. I mean, why the f*** am I even talking about this movie? Is it by the book? Nope. It sure isn't. I guess we kind of covered that already, but there are two things in this entire movie that are kinda sorta from King's story, which I mean, why bother including any of it at this point? To sum up how wildly unlike King's story this movie is, I will read both a summary of the short story and then a summary of the movie back to back. Here is a summary of the short story. After making a long overdue call to a lawn care company in order to hire someone to mow his yard, our main character gets more than he bargained for when the new hire shows up to do the job and utilizes some unconventional methods to trim the grass. Although effective, Harold finds this absurd strategy rather offensive, and the Lawnmower Man doesn't take kindly to Harold's efforts to keep him from finishing the job. Now here's a summary of the movie. A scientist decides to experiment on a developmentally disabled gardener in an effort to give him greater intelligence. The experiments give him superhuman abilities, but enhance his aggression, turning him into a man obsessed with evolving into a digital being. So, yeah, not by the book, like not even a little bit. Soundtrack and score. I didn't listen that closely because I was begrudgingly watching this piece of shit and just didn't care anymore, but what I caught consisted mostly of terrible synths and fake-sounding voice emulators. It's a soundtrack that tries to be cutting-edge and futuristic and fails at being either of those things. Cast and acting. Honestly, I didn't watch the entire movie. Going into this, I was already pissed that they pilfered King's story title and outright threw his story in the trash. So when the movie started to immediately suck ass, I found myself unable to make it more than 20 minutes in. So as far as actors go, Pierce Brosnan is in it, and so are some other people who should all be grateful that this movie didn't tank their careers. Special effects. Again, I made it about 20 minutes in, so maybe things get better. I mean, of course they don't, but what I saw of the special effects was terrible. Like the soundtrack, they tried to be futuristic and failed supremely. They attempt to envision what virtual reality will look like, and let's just say it didn't age well. It's god-awful, in fact, and it was anything but cutting edge for 1992. I continually find myself returning to the Jurassic Park comparison. Jurassic Park came out 1 year after this movie, and the special effects were amazing. Yes, the budget for Jurassic Park was $60 million versus the Lawnmower Man's $10 million budget, but for God's sake, if you can't afford to make a good movie, then just don't make one. I do feel it is important to point out that Angel Studios Incorporated, who did the CGI for this movie, went on to become Rockstar San Diego, one of the Rockstar Games studios, and the studio that would eventually give us Red Dead Revolver, Red Dead Redemption, and GTA. So they've come a long way, and Red Dead redeemed themselves. I'm sorry, that was admittedly not funny. Final thoughts. Okay, so clearly I went into this movie with a preconceived notion that it was going to be terrible, and I was unwilling to give it a chance to stand on its own merits. I kind of wish I hadn't read up on the movie and done my research before watching it, so I wouldn't have known what to expect, but I feel like I would have been even more pissed had I walked into this blind. I just had no interest in watching this movie, and perhaps one day I will be able to try again without the bias I hold for what they did to King and his story. But I'm not going to hold my breath. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty please with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.